Good morning out there in Radio Land. I am glad you got your radio turned on and tuned in to 106.1, the Flip FM. And welcome to 2025, a brand new year. And we got a lot in store for us in the year ahead. And I wanted to start off this year with having a guest on the show today. I have Vanessa with me from Covenant Hospital, and she's involved with a special program there. But I thought it would be important because this time of year, we are thinking about the New Year's resolutions. You've probably already made them through December, and we talked a little bit about that in December about making those New Year's resolutions. But one of the most important resolutions you can make is a resolution for your own well-being. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And as I've talked about in the program before, I kind of have a holistic view. There's a spiritual component to each and every one of us, that spiritual component that we can look at when we're dealing with the different situations of life. But there's also a mental, an emotional, a physiological aspect to our being. And all of those need to be looked at and examined. A lot of times as a minister, when I'm counseling with somebody, and the particular topic we're going to look at today is dealing with addictions. And if I'm talking to somebody about that, there's a spiritual aspect of not allowing things to control you and control your life and control your appetites because you want to surrender that to the Lord above. But there is a physiological reality that comes with those addictions that are playing on your body and on its now slowly building and adapting habits and chemical dependencies. And that has to be addressed by the appropriate professionals to help with that. So I'm going to stop running my mouth for a minute, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Vanessa, let her introduce herself, and we're just going to have a roundtable discussion a little bit about the wonderful program and work that Covenant has going on. And if I understand, this program is sort of centered in Level Land, but it's expanded to basically all Covenants. You can get into this program from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa and let her talk at you for a second and introduce herself and what this program is all about.
Well, hello. As Carl said, my name is Vanessa, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a joy.
Oh, looking forward to getting the word out about 180 services because it is so important, not only in our area, in nationwide, the issue of substance use disorders. And as you mentioned, not only is it a mental, emotional struggle, but it's also a physical struggle. Once these substances begin to decrease the concentration in our blood and tissue, our bodies have a physical reaction to the absence of these substances. So what we focus on is medical stabilization. A lot of people refer to it as detox, to get the patient back on even ground so that they can begin thinking about long-term treatment plans. A number of our patients are referred to inpatient treatment centers, intensive outpatient treatment centers. But the goal specific to 180 service there in Covenant is to make sure that you withdraw from these substances safely.
Yeah, and that is important. I've known individuals not even dealing with what we would think of as a normal addiction. I had a friend that I was going to school with many decades ago that had an addiction to chocolate bars. And, we don't think about that a lot of times, but I mean, he would consume mass amounts of chocolate bars there in the college classroom over the day. And of course, it was affecting his health in a lot of ways. But then when he went to try to stop that, he actually crashed because he just tried to stop cold turkey, and his body was used to processing a certain level of sugars and everything, and it totally disrupted his system because it wasn't gradual. I know that's a little different, but the actual play on the body happens the same way. I know a few years ago I stopped drinking sodas, and that's just a whole different world altogether. It is not healthy. We all have a lot of habits that aren't healthy for us, but certain habits unfortunately get a certain stigma attached to them, and that's the alcohol and the drugs and even like the cigarette smoking, the vaping. Those things get a certain stigma attached to them, but really anything that controls your urges is an addiction. And so we shouldn't look at people with these ones we put a stigma on in a different light than we can't stop drinking Coca-Cola or Dr. Pepper or Pepsi or whatever it is, or can't stop eating the Three Musketeers and Snickers or whatever it might be that we might have an addiction to. But of course, certain addictions come with perhaps a greater impact on an individual's life and the lives of those around them. So in the program at Covenant, it's a detox program. How long does that detox normally take place?
I love that you mentioned this because each individual, of course, is different. The substance that they are dependent upon will make a difference as well in the length of time. We do treat alcohol withdrawal, opioids, and prescription medications. On rare occasion, cocaine, and also benzodiazepines. And the withdrawal from alcohol is extremely dangerous. Not to say that any withdrawal is less than, but high incidence or frequency of seizures, heart palpitations. So the doctor will not release the patient until they are medically stabilized. If a patient comes in and, unbeknownst to him or her, you have diabetes, that will also be treated and stabilized before the patient is discharged. It can be as short as 3 days. It can go as long as 10.
Right.
And the great thing is, actually I'm handling a situation right now, is whenever you are discharged from the hospital, you have a plan. You're not just going to return home or return to what we've always known. So me, from personal experience, after detox, I felt great. I thought I had kicked the habit. But you go home, you're surrounded by all the same. You have all of these emotions and your mind is clear. You're remembering things. So what do? You go back to what you know.
Right.
And that's what I am most proud about when it comes to 180 services, is that you're going to have me as a monkey on your back. Like, how you doing today? Is this place working for you? Do we need to try something different? And I'm going to provide those follow-up services for the individual as well as the family for a year.
Okay. That is excellent. I know when I did hospice work, and I know it's whole different avenue, but dealing with the loss of a loved one, it wasn't sort of, all right, funeral's over, have a nice life. Right. We would actually do what we call bereavement services for a year following that, checking in with the family and so forth.
Love that.
And I'm glad that you guys do that, because there's a lot of programs, unfortunately, as soon as you walk out the door, they're done with you. Yep. But the struggle's not over. You've just put your feet on the pathway to recovery. They got you to a point where you're ready to move forward, but you need someone to walk. And I glad you brought up something about yourself, which I knew, but I wasn't going to be the one to introduce it. But I think it's good too in programs like this. You're a case manager. You kind of, like you said, you're the monkey on the back. You're there with them, but you've experienced this yourself.
Absolutely.
And you're coming through that. I have a son who's been on and off the wagon with alcohol related to when he was in the Army, and he got banged up pretty bad and had medical issues, but he wasn't getting the pain management for what he was doing. And so alcohol became his pain management, because he was looking for something. He couldn't even sleep at night unless he drunk himself to sleep. And so that's always an ongoing. It's never done. And I had a friend in California, and me and Vanessa were talking the other day. I mentioned this to her, but he was my go-to. I mean, these serious addictions, I personally have never struggled with. So I can't say I've been there and I've walked through that, but I like to know people who have. So in my role as a minister, if I happen upon someone that's having that struggle, well, you know what? Someone who's been there. And I had a guy in California he was addicted to drugs for 15 years after coming back from Vietnam. And he said, like you said, he went to detox programs. He went to about 5 different programs. And the way he would preface it is, I was clean after the program, but still addicted. Mm-hmm. And so that addiction's still there. And it takes a lot more time to get mastery over that addiction than it does to just get clean. And like you said, there needs to be a plan in place. What does that plan look like? Now, I know it's going to vary for every individual and their circumstance, but are there like general components to that plan?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought this up because it is going to vary based on the individual. But the primary goal is to have some structure in order, even if it's intensive outpatient treatment, which some individuals do prefer that avenue because they have work, they have school, they have priorities. And so there are so many options available, and I've met with several different programs. Another component of it is establishing with a home group, whether it's AA, NA, GA, CA. It's like, let's get you connected to like-minded individuals. From what I've been able to see through years of attempting recovery and living in recovery is human connection and support is really what has made the difference for me and some of the individuals that I'm in group with. But I do work with the patient in developing the plan. I do not say this is where you're going and this is what you're going to do.
Right.
Because it has to be up to the person to make this change.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So much of recovery depends upon the individual. And as you mentioned, addiction ranges, and I feel as Americans, we all have an addiction to something. We have this compulsion, this mental just craving for a new car, a new house, better food. I mean, it's just so much. And treating the body medically and getting the individual to a place where they can think and they can listen and they can make a plan. I feel like this is the first step on a long journey that hopefully I'll be able to walk with them for at least a year.
All right. Well, you made me think of about 3 things there. And I'll start with one, and then I'm going to throw a little Bible in there. But ownership, that is a very important thing. I mean, all kinds of people can give advice. All kinds of people can lay out a pathway, but the individual that is trying to make the journey, if they kind of map out those waypoints and take ownership, because it's their journey. Mm-hmm. Everybody around them is just there to assist them and motivate them and support them in their journey. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I've over the years and across the United States, anytime I'm talking to somebody that is having issues that are beyond the scope of just the spiritual, I try to plug them in with a group or a facility or, medical care, whatever it is, counseling, whatever it is, to address it. But a lot of folks out there try to mandate.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of walking with the person on the journey. And one of the things you said about plugging in with people. The Bible tells us bad company corrupts good morals. But the opposite, although the Bible doesn't say it, the opposite is inferred. Good company promotes good morals. And it's good to get plugged in with individuals that's going to promote that journey. And I want to put it that way, promote that journey and not so much promote that recovery. Because there's people who want you to recover, I'm sure, but they're not willing to put in the effort to walk with you and to provide the understanding. They know you're here and they know you should be there, and they don't even really know how to get you there, but they're going to give you all kinds of advice that may be uneducated advice. And so plugging in with that right group, and you mentioned all these A's, yes. AA, NA, CA. I say it oftentimes at church. I say I look at the church as SA, Sinners Anonymous. Because we all, like you said, we all have these habitual habits that are self-destructive. And we have these habitual habits that are just opposed even to our own religious views, whatever those religious views are. And that should be the mindset of the congregation, just like all those programs. I'm a sinner. Now, my sin might look different than the sin on the person on my right and the one on my left, but I'm a recovering sinner. And if we adopt that attitude, then we create and foster an environment where we're supporting and helping each other on that journey instead of being judgmental about the person on the journey. So plugging into that group is important. And then another thing you made me think of is where Paul writes about being content. And he says, I've learned to be content in all circumstances, whether in plenty or whether in want. And I think that's part of it, because you talked about how, we live in this world and we want and we want and we want. And sometimes when we can't achieve what we want, that's when we turn to other things to fill that void or to help in that, maybe that emotional feeling of loss and negativity because we weren't able to achieve some worldly goal. And so mastering contentment. I like to think that I've mastered contentment. I mean, I would be happy living in a self-made lean-to in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, I even spent about 7 months living in a shipping container once. Of course, I was in Afghanistan, and all my possessions you could fit in half a duffel bag. But I've lived in a lot of circumstances, but I kind of learned to be content wherever I found myself and make the best out of every opportunity. But that's not always easy.
Oh, it is not. In my personal program, that is something that I try my best to focus on, is to be content with where you're at. And something that you mentioned earlier that I failed to jump on is how so many of us are using these substances to self-medicate because of the shame and the stigma attached to our labels. You are an alcoholic. You are a junkie. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I am a person with a problem with alcohol. I'm a person. And so that stigma for a lot of individuals, it prevents them, it inhibits them from seeking help. I cannot admit that I have this problem, therefore I'm going to continue self-medicating with the substance I have a problem with. It's so much of it is a stigma that's imposed upon others by society. Yet society continues to harp on, we need change, it's like you are preventing people from asking for help. They are people.
Right. And that goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, too, about Sinners Anonymous. And I've talked about this many times at the congregation as well in different lessons and things. And I look at Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 1, 17 and following, talk about how the wrath of God is being poured out upon all the unrighteousness. But then it goes into a list. And we as human beings tend to prioritize lists. And little white lie. Okay? And we decide and we determine in our minds and make judgments in our mind beyond what God's word says about what is a major sin and what is a minor sin. So this list contains all kinds of things, all the way from murder to just being prideful and boastful disobeying parents is on the list. So the little white lie, disobeying parents, being a little boastful and proud, and murder are all on this list. But the key's the last verse of the chapter. Knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who commit such things, that's everything on the list. He doesn't specify. Commit such things. What's on the list and things like them is deserving of death. Now, it seems kind of harsh. Of course, Jesus paid the sentence for us. But God does not differentiate. Sin is sin. So when I'm sitting on a pew and I struggle with lying, and a person down the pew had recently got out of prison for murder, we're in the same boat. We're in the same boat. But we get that stigma. Like you said, society has a rating system. You know, these are the worst things. These aren't so bad. I did a lesson once. And I said, I'm going to tell you about 2 kinds of sin. I'm going to tell you about the worst, most terrible sin anybody can commit. And I'm going to tell you about the sin that really doesn't matter and isn't going to be held against you on the day of judgment. Now, that terrible, awful sin that's the worst thing in the world is what that other guy's doing. And the one that doesn't matter is what I'm doing.
Yep.
And that's what the human nature is. But we got to get past that human nature and realize everybody has struggles because, like you said, we're all human beings and we all have shortcomings. And my struggle might be different than your struggle, but we share a commonality in that we're both struggling. And regardless of how society might label that, and society's label shifts. I'm going to share one more. The time is really getting away from us, and I want to give you the most time. My mom, who smoked most of her life until basically she was on oxygen, and so it was kind of detrimental to light a cigarette with oxygen flowing through. But she said she remembers the day when smoking became a sin. She said they would go to church there in Arkansas, and as soon as worship was over, everybody would go outside and light up their cigarettes and be socializing and smoking. And then the Surgeon General announced that smoking is bad for your health, so it destroys the temple of the body. And the very next day, the very next Sunday, smoking is now a sin because of societal shifts. And of course, nobody was going out front after services and lighting up a cigarette. They just waited till they got home. Mm-hmm. Okay? They were still doing it because the addiction was there. The habit had been formed. But they just kind of changed where they were doing it.
You hide.
But we got to learn as human beings to accept people where they are. There's a song we sing a lot at services, Just As I Am. And when we come into a spiritual relationship, we start that spiritual relationship just as I am. And it's a journey, a process. And oftentimes, we need help on that journey. Well, we got about 7 or 6.5 minutes left. I'm going to turn the mic over to Vanessa and not be a mic hog. I talk for a living, so it's hard for me to stop. But go ahead, Vanessa. You got anything more to add to our discussion?
I love so much of what you said. And one of the ways that a group member helped it stay in my mind to welcome and meet people where they are, how they are, is Popeye. I am what I am, and that's all I am. And I've just totally adopted that. Just come as you are, and please just allow me to stand beside you. I'm not going to lead you, I'm not going to push you, and I'm not going to walk away from you, but we need to have movement. We need momentum. And I think that it's great to have individuals even just call me and have someone listen to them. I had a conversation with a gentleman last week, and he was saying things to me, and I could tell he was looking for a reaction, a look of disgust, a look of rejection. And I'm like, dude, I've heard it all, keep talking.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what's beautiful about this program is that I know where you're coming from. I didn't learn it in a book. I'm not going to spout textbook material to you. But it all starts with a phone call or stopping by the office to visit. We'll do an assessment over the phone, and we can set an appointment as early as the next day. Come on in and let's start working together. If you have no idea what comes after detox, that's totally fine. That's why I'm around. That's why I make rounds with the doctor and the nurses. Like, how you doing today? You ready to talk? Or just meeting the person where they're at. And they set the tone and they set the stride. And I'm just there as a resource, really.
Right. And it's their journey. And that's the important thing.
Yep.
Yeah, when you said stride, it took my mind back to the air guard, and it's funny. A lot of times I'll be having conversations with people, and they might start using swear words or might be saying things, and I'm a minister, so they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." I'm like, "Look, I did 21 years in the military. There's nothing that can come out of your mouth that I haven't heard 1,000 times." We actually had a soldier coming to a Bible study for a while, and he couldn't form a sentence without swearing. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was it was so ingrained in the culture that he had been, and he doesn't even realize he's saying it. And, the Lord's name and the F-bomb probably don't belong in the same sentence. And after about 2-3 times of him coming regularly, some of the other people in the class, which were also military members, were like, "Hey, you need to talk to him about, his language, or just stop coming." I'm like, "No.
Right.
No. That's where he's at right now. And as he continues his journey, he will self-correct." Mm-hmm. But we're not going to, if you don't like it, you can stop coming. He's going to keep coming. And it will work itself out as he continues this journey. And we don't understand that. But there was a soldier who couldn't make the run. And I mean, he was tall, 6'6". He should have super strides, but I was tasked with helping him qualify. And I noticed his stride, he was taking half a step. I mean, his heel was landing about midpoint on his other foot every time. And so at one point, as I was going with him, I just started walking. He's moving his legs like he's running, but I'm just walking. And I told him, I said, "You're moving at a walking pace." But it wasn't immediate that he's going to start taking strides. We had to start doing things in the gym on treadmills and stuff to kind of reprogram his body to take different strides. And it's the same thing with whatever you're recovering from. Your stride right now is just where it's at. And the ideal is just to open that stride a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's a process, not just, "Hey, I showed up at detox, I left, I'm done, I'm good." Nope. All that really did was identify the problem and get you at a place where you could start the journey. Well, we got like 2 minutes left. You mentioned a number.
Yes.
What number can someone call to reach out?
Okay, you can reach me by dialing 806-568-1304. Now, it is an office number, but it forwards directly to my cell phone.
All right. Outstanding.
So, anytime, anywhere, if I don't answer, leave a voicemail and I will get back to you.
Okay. What's that number one more time?
806-568-1304.
All right. You can also go to www.180. That's spelled out ONE-EIGHTY.life and see a whole lot more about this program. I know there's a contact tab on there as well. I believe that same number is listed on there, so you can get all that information there. Well, Vanessa, our time is almost expired. I was glad to have you on the program. Maybe we can do this again in the future. For those folks out there still planning their New Year's resolutions, if you are struggling with something, resolve right now to start that journey. And there's people that will take that journey with you. I hope God blesses you in this new year. He watches over you, but most of all, remember, He'll walk with you on that journey as well. Look forward to talking with you again next Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for the next iteration of Cogitations.